afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to the Kettleson Cooking Show. On today's episode, we're going to talk about Brussels sprouts and braising Brussels sprouts. Now, you might say when I was a kid I hated eating Brussels sprouts. Well, today what we're going to learn is a simple way to make Brussels sprouts that your family is going to love. This is a wonderful side dish to just about any kind of entree that you're going to serve. We're also going to talk a little bit about budgeting, and we're also going to talk a little bit about football. So come on, let's learn about how to make Brussels sprouts. So what you're going to need for this recipe is, first and foremost, you're going to need a baking sheet. Any kind of baking pan or baking sheet are going to be. We're going to preheat our oven to 400 degrees. You want your oven at 400 degrees. We want that oven nice and hot. So maybe if you're going to do this at home, you might want to just come in, make sure your oven's turned on, preheat it to 400, then come in, change out of your suit, get in your lounge around clothes, and then come back out. We have our baking sheet. We're going to need olive oil. We're going to need a little bit of olive oil. What you want to do with any kind of foods is to make them taste better is to add sugar and fat. With this recipe, we're not going to add any sugar, but we do want to add a little bit of fat. We're going to get that fat from the olive oil. We're going to need some salt, and we're going to need some pepper. The last thing you're going to need to make this recipe is a plastic bag. A Ziploc plastic bag, I have one right here. Any kind of sandwich bag will work. Perfect. You know, I was lucky enough to have lunch with a dear friend. A colleague of mine. We had worked for the same company for a long time, and actually the last 2 years of his career, I got the honor for him to work for me. And we had lunch together. He was so overjoyed because his son was going to get married. And I was so happy to see how happy he was. After retirement, he tells me he's been really extremely busy, but he's really looking forward to his son getting married for one particular reason. He wants grandkids. But I was thinking a lot about that and about how we can help and really think about a thing like a wedding, or how can we plan a wedding. And it all comes back to that budgeting word that we talked about. So let's talk a little bit about budgeting, and let's talk a little bit about Brussels sprouts. We'll see if we can add some football. What you always want to do with Brussels sprouts are awesome because they're very, very cheap. This is a wonderful way to feed your family with a very good, nutritious vegetable, but it's cheap. You always want to make sure that you wash it. So when you get them home, I always take them and I put them in a colander like this, and I just run water over the top of them. Not looking to really do anything crazy, just making sure that they're nice and clean. Okay? The second thing we want to do with the Brussels sprout is cut them. Now, there's a proper way to cut them. The first thing you want to take off is this end here. We do not want this little tiny end, so we're going to cut it like this. Then once we got it cut like that, then we're going to cut it one more time like this. If any of these leaves fall off, just discard them in your sink like that. So once again, we're just going to do that with the rest of these. Cut, open. Anything comes off, we discard. I tell you, when I was a kid, my mom would tell me she would make Brussels sprouts, and I don't know if you guys know this about me or not, but my mom was a horrible cook. Part of the reason why I like cooking, I think, is because my mom was so bad at cooking. Now, there were certain things that she made really well. My mom could make a sandwich better than anybody in the world, believe that or not. And she made a wonderful apple crisp, but outside of that, most things she made was really overdone, and it wasn't seasoned correctly. Primarily because she didn't really understand the basic concepts of cooking. So hopefully in this show, we're going to do really simple dishes to talk and really learn how the basic functions of cooking are. One of those concepts, of course, is sugar and fat. You'll hear me say that over and over again. Sugar and fat taste good. Another one of those concepts, though, is you want to make sure that all your vegetables that you're going to cook are cleaned and drained and just as debris free as possible. We don't want any other kind of object or anything that might be on the vegetable to be in our food. We want it to be just a clean vegetable. My kids absolutely love these Brussels sprouts. And it's kind of crazy because my youngest daughter, you know, she's been eating this since she was real little. And she doesn't know that other kids don't like an item like Brussels sprouts. So you might have to get them to go. My middle daughter, she loves the saltiness of this. So I try to add a little bit more salt to this recipe than you might think that you would add. And I encourage you to play with it. Because some people like a little saltier, some people like a little less salt. And you know, you think to yourself, well, and I've said this before on this show, wow, I don't like to add all that salt in my food because I'm afraid about sodium. But I'll tell you guys this, the little bit of salt that you're going to add to your food in your own kitchen is nothing compared to the amount of salt the average American intakes from McDonald's. So if you are concerned about salt or sodium in your diet, make sure that you're eating a lot of your meals at home and not going to fast food restaurants. Because fast food restaurants will considerably increase the salt intake in your diet. Okay, I have these done here. Now, what I want to do now is I want to take all these Brussels sprouts and put them in the plastic bag. Because what we need to do is we need to get that fat to coat these vegetables to make sure that they taste the best they possibly can. I think the loveliness of this dish is really in the sweetness of the Brussels sprout when we're gonna braise it. And braising, all it is putting it in a hot oven with the saltiness of the salt that's added. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a little bit of olive oil. Now the recipe here calls for 2 pounds of Brussels sprouts to every 3 tablespoons of olive oil. But we're not going to take a tablespoon measure out and measure out the olive oil. Just simply put it in the bag and get it to a point where you can kind of see the olive oil is a little bit at the bottom, but it's not too much. Now once again, we're going to put salt in second. When you put salt in the bag, remember, my daughter Josie loves this to be nice and salty, so I might add a little bit more salt, but you can play with this at home. And then the final thing we're going to add here is just a little bit of pepper to the bag. We want to make sure that we balance out that sweetness with just a little bit of pepper. Okay, so we have those 3 things. Now here's the fun part. We're going to take the bag, we're going to seal it up, and we're just going to mix it all around. Woo! Look at that. Got to seal that bag a little bit better. We're going to mix it all up. Make sure that we mix those, get that olive oil or the fat from those olives all over those vegetables. And we are going to make sure that they've got nice coating of salt and pepper. And then we're going to get our sheet pan out. Now, you can just put them directly on the sheet pan. I got to think about cleaning this stuff. So what I always do is I just put a nice little piece of tin foil down on the sheet pan just to make sure that I have my cleanup is as easy as possible. All you're going to do is you're going to dump them right onto the sheet pan, and you want to kind of spread them out. Whenever we bake something, we want to make sure that the air, the hot air in the oven, can get around the food to get a nice baking action going. Alright, we have that done. It's going to look kind of like this. Your Brussels sprouts should be nice and shiny. You can see the salt, the pepper on each one. These look absolutely delicious. We're going to take them and we're going to shove them in the top shelf of the oven. Now, I threw in a few other earliers. Generally, this is going to take between a half hour and 40 minutes to cook. And what you want it to look like when they come out is you want them to look like this. You want them to look nice and crisp on the outside. You want them to look very, very crunchy and crisp. The salt, the pepper is just nicely on the outside of them. And you take them and you put them in. I made just a few of these in the first one. We're going to take them and we're going to put them right into this pan right here. And I'm going to tell you this. Your kids are going to look at this at first and say, these kind of look a little bit on the burnt side. That's what you want them to say. Because these right here is how you want it to look. You want them to look nice and crisp, because what has happened here is the outside has got a nice salty crust to it, and on the inside what we have is a wonderful sweet flavor of the Brussels sprout. So that's how we make braised Brussels sprouts. Now, I was talking to you guys about Luke and his son. I think the key thing, no matter what we do, whenever we have a big expense like a wedding, or for that matter, whenever we go about our daily lives, when we think about it, what we really need to do is have a budget in mind. And you know, the temptation is when you're buying a car or a house or a wedding is to spend more than you actually can afford. I encourage you strongly that really think about it. You know, after all these years in banking, I can see the difference between a wedding that somebody can afford and a wedding that somebody can't afford. And quite frankly, the people that are in the wedding really can't tell any difference. What you can tell is whoever pays for it. So in Luke's situation, we talked about his son really setting a budget for the wedding and really executing that budget. And what that means is just keeping track of everything you say. And it doesn't have to be down to the penny. But you want to make sure that if you say to yourself, I'm going to spend X amount on the wedding, that you stay within that budget. I'm going to tell you they're going to have a great time. It was so nice to see my friend's joy in his son getting married. I'm so happy. I think about just the happiness that my family provides me, and when my daughter's getting married, what I'm going to think of, and especially the fact that he was so happy that his son was now going to have the opportunity to have children and for him to be a granddad. I know he's going to be a wonderful grandparent. I look forward to seeing that wedding, and I look forward to being with Luke to see his face when he has his first grandchild. So guys, thank you so much for watching this episode of the Kettleson Cooking Show. I hope your family enjoys the Brussels sprouts. And just remember, when you think about planning a big event, make sure that you're really putting the numbers too with it and sitting down and saying, okay, this is how much I want to spend on it. Because I'm telling you, Luke's son doesn't care how much his dad spends on the wedding. What Luke's son really wants is just a place where his family can come together and celebrate his marriage. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.